on to the official presentation portion. This presentation is going to be on Python 3. The presenter is Ross Larson, which is me. The new bit of information that everyone may not know is that as of next Tuesday, I am a software developer for Cooperative Resources International.
Oh, good.
Where are you? Cooperative Resources International is in Shawnee, Wisconsin. They are a cooperative of farmers. They are the #1 employer of farmers in the nation, and they are a wonderful place. I am very excited to start out. As of right now, I don't know a ton, but I know enough to be very excited about the work that I'm going to be doing. I'm actually, because of that, I'm actually also going on the associate degree level track for programming. Because of actually positive experiences with Python and with Java, which I took after taking Python. But this Python 3 was the first language I ever learned, and that was actually about 12 months ago now. So I had a very positive experience, and if you are looking to start a programming languages and you've never learned anything before, you're starting at zero, give Python a try. It's how I started. It seemed pretty user-friendly, pretty newbie-friendly. Even if you know nothing, Python seems a little less daunting to begin with because there's not the crazy braces and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Is it also an object-oriented language or not?
It is an object-oriented language, but it is also very loosey-goosey, and so that you can do a lot of different things. But yes, everything is an object in Python. So definitely, it'll teach you really good object-oriented paradigms. So yes, moving on to the actual presentation. Here's Russ. Hi. So, what's Python, anyways? It's not the snake. It's the Monty Python troupe. They named it in honor of the Monty Python and the Flying Circus. In general, they started kind of, gurgling up the ideas in the late '80s. Guido van Rossum, the benevolent dictator for life, is the head of the program and will, for as long as he is alive, be the head of Python. I believe the first official release was, I think, in 1989. Guido van Rossum is now an employee at Google. Basically, Google saw enough value in the language that employing the designer of the language was something that was high on their priority list, and a lot of Google runs on Python. So that's, if it's good enough for Google, it's probably good enough for the little things that I'm doing too. In general, 2000 was when version 2.0 came out. That's really when they started opening it up and going more towards making things transparent, making things community-driven, they have PEPs, which I believe are Python something proposals. But yeah, it's ways the community can suggest ways to improve Python, and then by the community's support, they can figure out what is most useful for moving on in the future. Around the time, in 2008 was a pretty big year for Python. One of the things that happened was Python was chosen for Google App Engine. One of the two languages that Google App Engine uses is Python, the other is Java. And two of the major releases came out. The one that I'm going to be talking about is Python version 3, which is backwards and incompatible with the previous versions. Some developers still use Python 2.6. Python 2.6 came out, I think, in September of 2008. So basically, there's everything up to Python 3 and Python 3. They are not compatible. They are actually relatively similar. There's actually a Python 2 to 3 script that you can take Python 2 code and change it into Python 3 code. Basically, the biggest difference is that, here, I'll actually show you. So if you start Python, if you print something, the old way of doing it was, basically, this would be how to print something in Python 2.6. It doesn't work in Python 3. You have to do this. Well, actually,
close.
I'm getting ahead of myself. So, okay. So back to the presentation. You. Yay, open office presenter.
Did you all tab out of it or something?
Yeah, I did alt tab out of it. Maybe I need to alt tab back into it. Oh, that's it, because it's already up. That's why. Okay. So, why use Python? First of all, when you talk about it, you can use MontyPython graphics, which is just cool. But in addition to that, tons and tons and tons of stuff use it. Django actually uses it. Pygame, Google App Engine, Quickly, PyQt, PyGTK, Zope, and more. In addition to, this is definitely a partial list. Python is quite, it's okay with running on just about anything. There are implementations of Python in Mac, in Linux, in some Unixes. Symbian phones, the Symbian S60 phones have a version of Python. The Open Pandora console, which exists for some people but not for me, even though I've pre-ordered. Eventually it will though, and I'm very excited. And it has an implementation of Python. There's lots of different implementations. Then Python, in addition to running in a lot of places, runs with a lot of other things. There's Jython, which is Java and Python together. There's Cython, which is Java and C and C++. There's IronPython, which is Java and .NET. There are a lot of different implementations of Python plus something. For example, the bottom half, PyQt and PyGTK, are Py with the Qt, KDE type stuff with Linux, and then PyGTK is Python with the GTK end of things. Basically, a GUI on top of the Python underneath. Basically, it works with just about anything, and that's pretty cool. Okay, I'm sold. So theoretically, if you wanted to run Python 3 and you were running Ubuntu, you just look for Python 3 and install it. Regular Python, if you just type Python, that's probably already installed, but that's going to be the Python 2 series. So if you just type Python, it's going to be there, but it's going to be, the code that you write that's Python 3 code probably won't run in the regular Python set that you have. So usually just doing it via Synaptic, I can get out of there. If you wanted to do it, you just go into Synaptic, show your password to everybody. Then basically, you just type this in, and it'll show up. Another thing that if you really, other things that you may want to install. So here's Python 3. There's other stuff in there. I mean, if you really like Tickle TK or that type of stuff, you can get in there too. Other things that if you are already here, you might want to install. Idle, named after Eric Idle from MontyPython, is an IDE specifically for Python. There's also PyDev, which is a plugin for Eclipse. I think I'll have that later on in my presentation. Okay, yeah, oh, it's this slide. Another thing you can also use, you can just use a regular text editor or the command line to check your code. So, gedit or gedit, however you refer to it, Vim or the graphical versions of Vi or Vim. Or if you want to do IDEs, you can do that too. If you're trying to figure out how to put the PyDev plugin onto Eclipse, I have a how-to on my blog, but the net connection is slow, so I'm not going to bring that up right now. It's actually partially a video that I found with updated instructions on how to do it in Ubuntu 10.04 because some of the stuff changed. And I also put in the Django plugins because Django has a start server, stop server. Basically, okay, I wrote my Python code, now make it a server. There basically are stop-start buttons in Eclipse so that you don't have to do that via the command line. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So, oh goodness gracious, you were talking too fast. How on earth am I going to figure out how to do this? Luckily for you, there's a ton of documentation out there. The Python website itself has a ton of documentation, which hopefully it's loaded now. If you have a fast internet connection, this loads right away. It's like 2 megabytes total of all the documentation for Python on the Python site. So that usually doesn't take too long to download. You can actually download it and have a local version. That's not an issue at all. You don't have to always go to the internet. You don't need an internet connection. You just need to think ahead of time, which I did not. Dive into Python is actually a really good resource. There's the book that I used in the class that I took a college class at Fox Valley Technical College with Brian Blazer. He is an amazing professor. If you want to learn, he will allow you to do so. If you want to have an easy class, drop his class, don't take his class, because you're not gonna, it's not a slough-off class. You're gonna need to learn how to do things in order to do it. The book that we used at this time was Programming in Python 3, which at the time was one of the only books that was available. One of the things, this is a little dense. I wouldn't say this was a great book for never having done programming before, although it is a pretty good book for having done programming before. Dive into Python. When I didn't understand what this book meant, I went to the Dive into Python site, and it would help give me another explanation of the same thing. So hearing the explanation 2 different ways really helped me out. In addition, YouTube is a great resource. Just look for Python 3. Make sure that the tutorial video that you're going at is either a Python 2 video or a Python 3 video. That's the big thing, so you don't learn something the wrong way so that it doesn't work. Google is your friend. If you search your error message plus Python 3, most likely somebody's posted something about it and probably has fixed it. If none of that works, you can do IRC channels, but one thing about Python is that you can also do help, just like it says, type help. So if you wanted to, interactive help is a function. So basically it'll tell you exactly how to do it here as well. So in addition to all of the online resources, the interactive Python shell basically can help you on a lot of the things that you want, so keywords. So what if I wanted to learn what elif means? This is what elif means. Oh, it's part of the if statements, but basically it
Quit.
actually I think you just press enter. So if you're ever trying to exit the interactive shell, exit, open close parentheses, and you're done. So anyways, if those things don't work, you can always try IRC. If you haven't tried all of these things first, don't try IRC first, because most likely, sometimes there are helpful people out there. But if you haven't made any effort to solve the problem by yourself, they will be less excited about trying to help you. Because what usually people on IRC are looking for is, so what have you tried to do to fix the problem yourself? I'm not here to give you free things and free advice if the answer was already out there and you just didn't look for it. Like it or hate it, that's just how IRC is. If you've shown that you've made a lot of effort to try to fix your problem and you're still having issues and you're looking for additional brains to have, to give suggestions, that's going to be a warm-blooded person, hopefully, that may be willing to provide insight. And so it is kind of the last line of defense, at least for me. So now the Zen of Python is very interesting. One thing that's interesting about the Zen of Python is if you are in Python, it's actually an Easter egg. If you do import this, it comes up. This is kind of interesting. So this is the Zen of Python. Since I have it in slides, I might as well do it with the slides. Beautiful is better. Well, basically these are, I believe they call them axioms or something like that. Basically, it's a very short, seemingly cryptic way of describing how Python likes to think about things. So, beautiful is better than ugly. Explicit is better than implicit. Simple is better than complex. Complex is better than complicated. Flat is better than nested. Sparse is better than dense. Readability counts. Before we go on to the rest of them, I'd like to just explain just a little bit what those mean. Beautiful is better than ugly. We've all seen ugly code. There is plenty of ugly code out there. Python, by the way it's used, and its use of white space and indentation, looks better. It just looks, you don't want to say that code is beautiful, but the code looks nice. Explicit is better than implicit. The opposite of that would be Perl. Everything in Perl has a default value, and if you look at the code, you have no idea unless you know what every implicit parameter was, what they were referring to, but it isn't specifically indicated. In Python, as much as possible, they try to indicate explicitly, this is what's happening. So when you read it, you know what's going on. Simple is better than complex. That kind of goes without saying. It is. At least I think so. Complex is better than complicated.
Yeah,
if you have something that is more difficult, having something that's complex is better than having just this jumble of spaghetti that, it may be a lot of, a bunch of if statements or something like that, which is the next one. Flat is better than nested. Having a bunch of if, where by the time you're actually getting to the code, you have no idea why you're at that point because there's 17 levels of if that have gotten to you that point. Flat is better than that. Having it so that you're not conceptually 7 layers in when you're thinking about what you're trying to do is better than being 7 layers in and not knowing what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. Readability counts. Sparse is better than dense, and readability counts. Those go together. If it's sparse, if it's a little bit further apart and it's a little bit easier to read, it's going to be easier to work with. So readability counts. Yes, it does. Special cases aren't special enough to break the rules. In Python, there's reasons why the rules exist. Don't break them. Everybody knows that sometimes hacking something together in order to make things works really good in the short term. In the long term, it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the long term, and you are not special enough to ignore the rules of programming so that basically what you write, people can understand because you aren't breaking rules. Next thing, practicality does beat purity. You don't have to be ridiculously crazy about that, but please, we think we're more special than we are. In general, follow the rule. There's a reason that the rule exists. Errors should never pass silently. When something goes wrong, Python tells you about it, which is nice because other programming languages sometimes don't. And then when it actually does throw up all over the place and break, it's not as good because you don't know where the actual error happened. You also can silence those errors, which is great. Sometimes you don't want errors to be complaining to you. In the face of ambiguity, refuse the temptation to guess. Again, it's kind of, Python is a little loosey-goosey, but try not to guess when you're doing things, try to know. There should be one, preferably only one obvious way to do it, although that way may not be obvious at first unless you're Dutch. That is a reference to Guido van Rossum, the creator of the program who is Dutch. So now is better than never, although never is often better than right now. Again, if you want to get something done, do it now, although sometimes there's more important things to do. If the implementation is hard to explain, it's a bad idea. If the implementation is easy to explain, it may be a good idea. In general, again, this is finding clearer concepts to get things done is one of the goals of Python. So some other languages may take a lot more words and a lot more syntax to do the exact same thing that Python does in less words and in less space and in less braces, and semicolons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Namespaces are one honking great idea. Let's do more of those. They actually don't do namespaces in Python 3, I don't think, anymore. So that one's not as Zen-like. But that's pretty much the Zen of Python. In general, those statements in this document pretty much goes over what you're going to be doing with Python. So if you have a laptop here and you have Python installed, to open up the interactive interpreter, like I've been doing once or twice already. So let's get it back out. Okay. Type Python 3, and now you're on the interactive Python interpreter. You can do anything you want. License. Is it? Oh. One thing it does is, like a command line, it has the ability to go up and down with commands, which if you type something really long and then you mess up, it's nice to be able to do. So this is the Python license. You know, it's nice to read that sometime. Anyways, so, oh, it's long. Okay, so in general, you can try any Python command on the interactive line to see what it'll do at any time. I mean, you can even define, you know, a function, do the whole function in the interactive interpreter, and then run it, and it'll give you the result right away. It doesn't store it anywhere though. So obviously, unless you want to write every program as it's happening, you do need to do a little bit more than that. But let's see. So obviously this is what you see when I start this up. Now let's write a program. This is a pretty simple program. Basically, you just write print. You put, oh, there's no space there. Yeah, you put print and hello newlug. There's double quotes. I think you can also use single quotes. It's one of those, there should be one good way to do things type of thing. You could actually use triple quotes as well. But in general, so this prints. That's Python. Like basically name of the function, parentheses, does it. So you don't, no semicolons, no, you know, the exact way of doing this in Java would be system out dot print line hello newlug. So that's Java. They're doing the exact same thing that we're doing. Yeah, that's when you're starting out, when you just want it to print to the screen, it's nicer to remember print than this. So that's one reason why I really like Python, especially when you're beginning. Now, one other thing you can do, how about variables? So let's do a variable. So newlug equals San Dimas High School football rules. Anybody know where that movie comes from? What movie?
Bill and Ted's Excellent
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Okay, so if you go print newlug San Dimas High School football rules.
Okay.
So you know, you don't. This is where the Python loosey-goosey nature of things goes in. You tell it what to do, and most of the time, if it can, it's just gonna do it. You don't have to tell it, I'm giving you a string. If people don't know what types are, data has multiple different types. There's a lot of different data types. Python is a loosely typed language. It really, unless it can't do something with the type of data that you're putting in, it'll do it. And so that's partially awesome, but partially frustrating when you want to know, or you really want to specifically have some type of data going through. You don't necessarily have as strict control as you would say in Java, when you have to always indicate, you know, public, void, main, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Although then, it depends on what you're wanting to do, because in a lot of cases that is good too. So, okay, so we've used the interpreter, and we thought that was awesome. Oops. We used the interpreter. It was great. You know, we are now experts at the interpreter. So now let's do this. Oops. Because we're in Vim, you need to press insert first. Okay. Okay. Print. Hello, everyone. I'm presenting. Okay. Now, if you choose to save this, you can enter in a name. Let's call this hello. .py. Python files have the .py extension. One thing that's nice about editors, at least Vim and Gedit, whatever you want to call it, gedit, is when you write Python programs, it will highlight the syntax. So from now on, and with every different iteration, so for example, I like the desert color scheme, you have highlighted syntax of what you're using. Using just a regular old text editor. It basically knows mostly what you're talking about, and it has the ability to say, oh, look, you're doing a function. And then it brings up the yellow for the function, and this is a string, and red, and here are your two parentheses, so that you can remember, oh, I didn't put in another parenthesis, or whatever. But, okay, you save this file, you're done. Now, if you open up a new command, or a new command line, and you do Python 3 hello newlug, it just runs. So you don't really need to do anything special to your text file for it to happen. In general, you should also put in the, I believe it's called hashbang. So you put in, usually you would put in hashbang user bin env python 3 at the beginning of your program. That's usually what you would do. Most of the time it's okay, but it's again, the right way to do things is to put that in there so that if you made your .py an executable file, well actually let's do that. Okay. Hashbang user.bin.env python 3. Let's bring up a folder. Probably has a whole bunch of different stuff in it. Okay, let's open this. Let's open it with gedit so that you can see a different way of doing it. Okay, I've put that in here. Now, and you can also do this on the command line, but allow executing this file as a program. Oops. Okay. Now, instead of saying Python 3 hello newlug, you can do just hello newlug in the command line and do the same thing. Because the hashbang basically tells you this is how I'm going to be interpreting this file, and it just takes care of all that. It can be its own executable file. You don't need to tell Python to run it. It just runs it by being an executable file, which is kind of cool. So, everyone is now experts in Python. Congratulations. You know, basically this is what you see. So, anything that you do in the interpreter that works, if you put it into a text file, also going to work, hopefully. There is a little bit of other things. Here, basically this is other things that you don't know having listened to me for a little while. Everything is an object. Object-oriented programming is something that it's A lot of people use Python in an object-oriented set. You can also do event-driven programming with Quickly, which I was mentioning earlier when as far as interacting with Glade and GTK. But everything is an object. Print is an object. Print has its own basically. Print has its own characteristics that you can understand, and you can do things knowing that print is an object. That was actually the difference between, one of the big differences between Python 2.6 and Python 3 is that print wasn't an object really. It was kind of not, and it kind of was. It was kind of an exception to the rule, and eventually they said, okay, you know what, print doesn't need to be an exception to the rule. Print can be part of the rules too. Data types. Python uses a variety of different data types. Strings is what we're using today, which is just a series of text. Booleans, true and false. Tuple is a list that you can't be changed. A dictionary is something with both keys and values that believe are unique. There's more stuff too. There's different types of numbers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Functions, basically, Python has functions, classes, and modules. A function is a series of commands that does one very specific thing. Class is a more general thing that can contain more than one function, hopefully that have to do with each other. A module is the file that contains the classes and modules, which can contain multiple classes. So it's you can have multiple modules working together, multiple different files, as long as Python understands that they're there. They're usually within the same directory. Arguments. Arguments is basically how, obviously none of the programs that were written today have any user input. We didn't tell them anything, either via the command line or while it was running. Python has ways of dealing with user input, but with that, with user input, you can sometimes not get the input that you were looking for, or users may mistype or do something that you're not expecting, give you a data type that you're not looking for, and it will. And if you haven't written it correctly, it will throw up all over the place, and it will tell you the error exactly where the error happened, because Python's very good at saying, in line 62 of this code, it didn't work, and this is why. If you don't want that to happen every single time, what you do is then exception handling as well as redirection. So exception handling allows you to say, well, if this goes wrong, do this. Redirection allows you to take the output from something and put it into something else. Loops are basically, like we were talking the if statement before, if something is some way, do something, or while something is some way, or else if. It's relatively common in programming, but it is good to learn. So soon, when you take a look at something like this, that makes sense. This is actually one of the example programs from this book. So it's yay for the GPL. It's GPL code. So basically, what they're doing is importing some stuff, defining a function, putting in some variables, then doing some a for loop, and then another for loop, and then another for loop, and then an if inside of the for loop that actually counts, and then a for loop at the end that uses stuff. And basically what it does is it then prints to you something. In this particular case, it's basically a searching program. You tell it a file name, you tell it a search term, and it'll tell you how many times a particular word occurs in a program, which, in 10 to 15 lines, that's not too bad. But that type of stuff and the importing of functionality is something that we haven't done yet. Python is not, just flowers and daisies, smiles and moonbeams, though. There are still things that you need to watch out for. Specifically, indentation and spacing, which I didn't use a lot because I had mostly one-line programs. Python uses indentation and spacing as a way of understanding what functions are doing and what controls what. Specifically, if you use a combination of both tabs and spaces in your spacing, that is bad. Specifically, you may hear this if you take the Python class with Brian Blazer. If you use both tabs and spaces in a Python program, that makes you a bad person. Because it does. It really, really does. You should never, ever do it. Your editor usually allows you to convert tabs into spaces so that you can say, when I press tab, I'm not really inserting a tab, just put in 4 spaces, or else I will be very angry at you, editor. So usually the preferences of your editor allow you to do that. Also, specifically if you're wanting to learn Python 3 and you don't know any other languages, watch out. There's different versions of Python and they are not compatible. So if you just type Python or if you search for Python, you'll often find information for Python 2 point whatever, right? Usually 2.6.2 I think is what's right now. Although they can be converted, they are not compatible. So when you're finding information about Python, make sure it's the Python that you're working with. Also, the loosey-goosey nature of Python. Because Python doesn't require you to very strictly define what you want, what you're looking for, why you're looking for it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, beforehand, sometimes when things don't work, you don't know why. Because the program in itself, one way of saying it, gives you enough rope to hang yourself. You have plenty of room and you have plenty of power. Sometimes you have too much power. You don't have the ability to narrow things down very easily if you don't know what went wrong sometimes, which specifically when you're starting out can be very frustrating, although it's a combination of liberating and frustrating because you don't have to think about it until things go wrong. And then you're like, oh my goodness, what happened? And now for something completely different because it's Monty. Any questions? One other thing I wanted to show you before we go crazy into question time. IDLE is, this is the interactive, the integrated development environment. So IDLE is very similar to the interactive Python command line, only when you do something like print, it'll come up with a little bit of help text. So that can be helpful for some people. I believe it might be a little bit easier to copy and paste if you're putting entire versions of stuff up. I haven't really used IDLE a lot. I also like, well, now that I've been using Eclipse, I like Eclipse. I want to keep using Eclipse. So there is a Python plugin. It's called PyDev. So if you are an Eclipse person and you don't want to leave Eclipse, you don't want to deal with IDLE, you don't want to deal with the command line, you know, use Eclipse. There's a plugin, hooray for you. There actually used to be a pay-for add-on, but that pay-for add-on has actually since been lumped into the open source plugin, so you don't have to pay to get all the functionality that people used to have to pay for and tell people that you need to buy the extra plugin. The extra plugin no longer exists. You just have it for free. So congratulations, everyone. Any questions about Python, what you do with Python, how to get more information about Python, stories about a Python, anything like that? Oh, Bicycle Repairman, again, to show the interaction with MontyPython, the Python debugger is called Bicycle Repairman because of this MontyPython skill, because there's a bunch of super people and they don't know how to fix bikes, so someone puts on a costume and he's Bicycle Repairman, and they're really excited about it. It's MontyPython. You may find it funny, you may not, but that's just pretty much how it goes. So, questions? Yes?
Can you make like a simple program there you have to input a number and it'll generate a random number and then add them together and spit out the answer? I just want to see how some of those specific things work.
Yes. Putting me on the spot as far as how to do it.
We can stop the video. If you want.
Sure, yeah, stop the video. So you
There's
want
a random number generator in there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there is.
There is. Yeah, I just can't remember what that.
Okay. Well, let's look up my old code and see if I've already done it.
You see, this 3 is way different. I remember a couple things that you didn't mention, and I think it's probably just because it's old stuff. And I was doing this in 1999. That was.
Well, yeah, and actually, well, when I put my my presentation up on
2.0.
SlideShare, the specifics as far as, actually, we could quick do that. There's a SlideShare presentation that was another intro that I thought was actually pretty good. Hopefully it'll come up.
I don't
But
have
it talks-
three, but
it talks
looks
about more
like there's a random
syntactic
module.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, let's start it. Well, actually, let's go. I don't know what I'm doing, so let's figure out modules random. Okay. There we go. So yeah, random is what we need to do. So import random. Now random's imported, and we have the ability to do random stuff. I don't know what random does, and theoretically I would find this from the Python documentation or from my book.
When you told it import random, imported the object,
I think it's a module.
module, whatever it happens to be.
One of the things, the concepts of Python is it's a batteries included programming language. It doesn't include everything when you start, but it does give you the ability to import the things that you need, and many of the things that you need will be importable quite easy. Like import OS gives you the ability to use Linux commands if you know you're going to be on a Linux system. So you can use Python in addition to your regular shell scripting, and just make a Python script instead of a bash script, and use Linux commands anytime that they are convenient to you, redirecting and using the output just as you could, as if you were using any regular Python functionality.
What can you import?
Is there anything
Import
particular we're trying to get here? It
modules,
looks like
objects,
there's a
classes.
random, you know, parentheses function that should return something, or maybe not.
You can't call it directly, apparently.
Well, try RAND with the parentheses. That's quite often the name.
I gotta remember what this was.
Pass a number in there, maybe.
Yeah.
Interval.
We'll put a number in random.
Well, let's quick check it
Is that
out.
what you meant?
Yeah, the parentheses.
All right.
Well,
That's pretty simple.
I don't have Python 3, so,
It might be the same function.
yeah.
Random module, pages 132.
Module object is not called. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I've taken this for a semester. I am by no means a Python expert for sure, but okay.
Yeah, there we go. This was the thing, man. It was like, this was the major thing I had to do. Decorators. Can I eat?
Okay.
This is a-
Basically, so I think if you make a list, like,
Well, it looks like you do all sorts of things like shuffling things and all kinds of
yeah,
bizarre things.
so name list equals list. Actually, let's camel case that. Name list equals list range. I'm gonna do most, basically from the book, 1970 to 013. Or,
Got that on the film there.
okay, now I've made a
Okay,
list.
yeah. Not quite. I gotta cut off just to the screen right now.
Random name list. Okay.
In that case, I wonder if it wasn't like random, period, random,
It might be.
parentheses.
Actually, yeah, you might be right. Random period. Ah. Print random dot random.
No, I was thinking parentheses after the random, because I think random's a function.
Yeah, let's try that. Yeah.
Like that.
So So you could say, let's say, 1 plus random dot random, and then right now because it's on the interactive command line, it prints it straight out. But you could also have random sum equals 3 plus random dot random print random sum. So is that what you're looking for? Kinda?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the one good thing about programmers is that they're lazy and they have lots of hubris, and so that even if they have no idea how to do something, they'll say that they can do it and figure out how to do it while they're coding. But yeah, that would be
And
an
you start
example.
Tuesday.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a way to implement functionality in general. The big thing, I mean, looking at the code, there's not a lot of semicolons or any semicolons really in Python, whereas a lot of other programming languages use some delimiter, some way of cutting everything apart. White space is the way that Python uses it, and to some extent that is liberating because you don't have to remember, oh my goodness, did I put in my semicolon? It won't work if I don't put in my semicolon. Or did I put in too many semicolons? Because it won't work if I put in too many semicolons. You know, it's just about having a logical delimiter. Works for some people. Having especially when you're learning, having a logical delimiter can be one more thing to worry about that you don't need to worry about when you're just trying to understand what's a string. How do I print a string? Or what's a tuple? How do I figure out how a tuple works? How do I, how do I use lists? So conceptually, it's a way to teach concepts without having to get too mucked up in the syntax of things. As you move, not everybody uses Python all the time, and Python isn't perfect for everything. For that stuff, use different languages. So after you know how to program and you understand the concepts, feel free to use them in a different language. Feel free to then have the ability to very strictly type, use a strictly typed language now that you know what types are and why they're good and why they're useful. Instead of the other way around, system.out.println, why am I putting all these dots in? What am I doing? Getting from I want to do something to actually doing it in Python is sometimes an easier task.
Ross?
Yep.
Explicit, you set the variable random sum equals to that expression or whatever.
Yep.
If you had and explicit is better than implicit, I guess. If you had told it just print parenthesis 3 plus random dot random to parentheses open, yeah. Right. It'll evaluate whatever.
Yeah, it'll just do it right away.
Okay, all right.
So,
See,
yeah.
you got a different number this time.
Yeah, I
hope so.
Well, that's what this is all about, okay.
So yeah, I mean, that's the fun of doing this, is figuring out how to do things that you weren't able to do before. And I mean, you could easily make a list of, these numbers and refer to them later or whatever. The other thing that's cool about Python is it interacts relatively well with other things. This class, the Python class that I took at Fox Valley Technical College, indicated how to interact with MySQL as well as how to interact with SQLite. So that there's a lot of integrated functionality with Python and SQLite, so that you have a database that you can kind of fall back on pretty much at any time, so that you're not trying to hard code or basically paste together a database or something like a database to use while you're programming. You have that functionality there. The batteries are included. You don't need to remake the wheel. Please just import the functionality that somebody else has worked very hard help you out with. So that's pretty much how to do that. Any other questions? Yep.
If you want this to run on Linux, Windows, Mac, whatever, well, let's say Linux and Windows, you wouldn't put the pound bang user bin bash.
The great part about that that specific line, it starts with a hash. You comment code in Python with hashes. I'm pretty sure. So comments, and it's going, print you. In general, when you comment something out, it's not going to show up. And the hash bang, or the pound sign and the exclamation point, is a very specific sort of comment that the operating system will look for if it needs to, but not if it doesn't. So if you put the user bin or user/bin/env space Python 3 in a Mac program or in a Windows Python script, doesn't matter at all. No problem. It will only use it if it needs to. And so, which is why you should use it no matter what, because it helps in the specific situation if you're using a Linux system, or I think it might even come in handy on a Mac box. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, it's good practice to do so. But it doesn't hurt you. It doesn't hold you back. All of the programs that we wrote in Python while at FETC, specifically, we were told, when this program is done, I should be able to run this on a Mac, on a Windows box, or on a Linux box, and it should do everything that we want it to do, no matter where you are. If you, though, know the specific box that you're going to be working on, you can use additional functionality, or with if loops, be able to say, if this is a Mac, or if the OS variable says, I'm a Mac, use this command. If it says I'm a Linux box, use this command. If it says I'm a Windows box, use this command. Or use Python functionality instead because the Windows commands aren't very nice, or etc. You have the ability to tailor specifically to one operating system, but the programming language by itself doesn't make you have to do that. You can acquire the ability to be operating system specific, but you don't have to be.
Two related questions
Yep.
about the object-oriented nature of Python.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, are objects and classes related at all like Java? And number two, do objects or classes have attributes and methods, or what's in an object or a class?
It's very similar. The object-oriented programming paradigm is the same whether you're in Python or in Java. The syntax behind having to do it is different. I think.
I mean, for example, is a object an instantiation or an instance of a class?
Is an object an instance of a class? Not necessarily. I think you can make objects outside of classes. You don't have to make a class in Python, but you can have a class, and that helps you as you move on. When you're the more complicated it gets, that's when classes come in handy, where you can refer to other things by their class, or I think you can do superclasses, but I don't remember.
What's in an object?
What's in an object?
What is
An object has attributes and actions.
Oh, attributes and actions.
Yeah, so basically it has things that define it and things you can do with it. So an object, with this particular object, there may be some specific either variables or constants. In this object, x is always equal to 5. Y is always equal to 103. List is always equal to this random list of things. So let's, but then basically with that, you can then do a particular number of verbs, of things. Then that's where the modules come in. No, the function. That's where the functions come in a class. So the functions are the verbs of what you do in that object. You can, if it's a farm, you can plant, you can sow, you can do different things as a function of being on a farm. And the farm is the object. You have corn, or you have soy, or so there's certain constants, there's certain things about your particular object that make it what it is.
So this will work in Farmville.
Yes. Well, actually, I don't know if Farmville is written in Python. Plenty of other cool stuff is. But yeah. So, is that help? The object-oriented paradigm is kind of complicated. It is a whole different mindset of doing it. The one interesting thing about Python is you don't have to do object-oriented paradigms with Python, although it doesn't hurt to do them. It's a pretty good way of doing it. You don't have to. So it is flexible enough, loosey-goosey enough that you don't need to have object-oriented paradigms. You can quickly does event-driven paradigms of the Python backup. So it's there's some modules, but it's all this triggers an event. Okay, write the event, and where it is, pretty much isn't as big of a deal. So, questions? Any other ones? If you're looking to do quickly, the Ubuntu program, I know there's a tutorial on how to do it after you install. There's information about quickly on the Ubuntu wiki as well. Linux Journal, in their most recent magazine, has an article about how to make a sample application with quickly. But in general, you install it. Tutorial is the tutorial project. Basically, it'll come up with a big help window and say, do this, now do this. And it'll give you kind of a step-by-step process of, take out this picture. You don't want this picture. Put in this, multi-column thing. Put a button over here, put a label over here. Put in a text box. You can put input into this text box. Now say this text box is related to an event. Open up your code. Most of it's already done. But with that event, write exactly what you want to have happen. And so, for example, the example program that Linux Journal does is makes a text box that you can enter in text information, hit enter, and it does a Google search on it, which is kind of cool. And you can write that app for yourself or something very similar to it in not very many lines of code, because almost everything's auto-generated, and you can do it for you. You can have your own images or whatever up. So it's a way to empower you to make applications even though you didn't think you were able to before. It's quickly in general is a way of empowering people that said, well, I could never write an application for Linux, like me. I would probably have said that very recently. I'm not going to do an entire GUI app all by myself. That's there's all sorts of little itty bitty things that you have to do. You have to learn all the GUI stuff. You have to learn how the GUI stuff goes together with your programming language. You have to make sure that the programming language that you want to use, or at least the programming languages that have any use whatsoever. And all of that, and then when you've written something that works, you need to package it back up. Quickly helps you package it up, and also it helps you publish it. So a lot of the things that were kind of hurdles and stumbling blocks, they've tried to remove them. So that would be one way of saying, I know a little bit of Python, now I can use Quickly. As a warning, I think Quickly uses Python 2.6. So I don't remember for sure, but still cool. Anybody else? Any questions? Was this presentation of value? Any feedback? Thank you. Thank you, everyone.